Right, thank you very much for joining, Jason. Good to see you again, mate. I hope everything's going well.
Amazing. Thanks again, Simon. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no problem at all. So look, thanks everybody for joining the Pod Leaders podcast, brought to you by Simon Gregory. Just within the podcast over the next 45 minutes or so, we're looking to cover a pretty interesting topic and something that's very close to my heart. Having built sales teams over the last nearly 10 years, but certainly Jason Smith, who's joining us today, has done that exceptionally well for a number of the Martech companies that we've seen hit the top of their respective markets, including Exponia, that got acquired by Bloomreach, and Jason was a big part of that. Insider, and most recently, MoEngage in the customer engagement platform space. So, on top of that, people that may not know, Jason's got some crazy talents outside of work. I think he's we sat and had lunch once, and he blew my mind talking about NIMS and some rock climbing adventures that you guys have been on. Have you been on any more recently?
Yes.
Or
no, next one's October 19th. We meet in Nepal, and we're doing Loch East and Abu Dhabi. So yeah,
wow.
Nothing planned between now and then. So yeah, for my challenges. A bad sport for somebody who doesn't like heights.
Yeah, I remember that's the thing that shocked me the most. But I guess that's shows your character. And the other one that I think you casually dropped into lunch was you being very good friends with Ant Middleton of all people. So have you got any more meetups with him in the recent future?
Yeah, no, they're all part of the same sort of kind of group, the mountaineering group and sort of stuff there as well. So yeah, so they're off doing lots of filming and sort of stuff at the moment in Australia and all sorts. So yeah, nothing planned in the short term.
Okay, cool. Okay, I wish I knew it's the circles we mix in, I think, But look, as part of the show, obviously today's all about building sales teams. The previous episode that we recorded was all around sales enablement. Check that out on our socials if you want to have a look at that. It's with Kunal Pandya, who's one of the best that I've come across from user testing. Just to give you a little bit of foresight, we're looking to try and cover things like building world-class SDR functions, the influence of RevOps on a go-to-market effort. We're going to touch upon that a little bit today, I think, around tech. And also we've got a really interesting guest that Jason knows from mParticle, who's built their whole channel and partnerships ecosystem. So we're going to talk a little bit about the influence and the impact that's having on the business themselves at mParticle, but also what they see the impact that can have on the broader space. So I guess without further ado, if it's okay, Jay, should we jump into some of these questions and just get going on that?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Okay, cool. So look, just in terms of the first question, I just wanted to, for the listeners that don't know you, hopefully all of them do, but the people that don't, can you just run us through in a couple of minutes a little bit about your backgrounds and sort of what brought you into sales leadership and ultimately MoEngage, where you currently are the VP of sales for?
Gotcha, yeah. Well, I'm one of those weird commercial people that actually didn't come from the commercial world. So I started off as a software engineer. I was always into tech to a certain extent, always working on the tech sort of side of businesses, spending time sort of on Google, Facebook in the early days. And then I crossed over to what was a new start business that then became a company called Groupon. So more of the sort of kind of strategy role, and that was probably my first flurry in building a product and taking that to market. And so if you know back sort of kind of Groupon in the early days, and it was started off as a sort of kind of 10 to 15 people in a WeWork office in Liverpool Street, before nobody really knew the brand. So we were sort of kind of growing that, expanding that quite heavily. So a lot of kind of growth factors. So I ended up moving to more of a strategic role within that around growth strategy. So that was really interesting. I mean, despite Groupon selling offers, predominantly it was a tech business. So it was offers as a service effectively. So that was great. That was a great experience for me for about 3.5 years. Then the business went IPO. So we then left post that, and then got involved. One of the directors in Groupon got involved with a company that was not called Exponia at the time. And said, look, hey, come on board. We've got no clients. We've got no presence. But I think we've got a great product. Let's take it to market. So that was my first sort of kind of really sort of kind of step into the GTM sort of kind of launching sort of strategy. So that's where I met the crossover between tech into sales, and the commercial roles. And since that, I've been doing sort of more of a commercial role aspect of it ever since. So yeah, it's been had the benefit of seeing both sides, from the technical side and also the commercial side, over the years.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting point. I think some of the best sales leaders that I've seen, have absolute credibility with the technology first and foremost. Do you feel that's really set you up well?
Yeah, I mean, end of the day, I'm a closet geek. I love tech. I was more interested in what stuff did, and so there was always better coders out there in the world. I was more interested in the commercial application of things anyway. And I think that's great when I go into businesses. I love understanding how they work, and how we can help operate. And I think that's really good for us, sort of demonstrating the ROI and the value from technology. Otherwise, what's the point of having it? So that's something I still get very involved in now, and it still gets me, it's really exciting sort of stuff to get involved in some really cool projects.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. Thank you for that. It's a really interesting journey. So, I mean, if we move on to that sort of GTM strategy piece that you touched upon there, and the learnings that you've had. Next question is about consistent or common mistakes that you've seen companies make across your career when setting up their sales function and GTM strategy, specifically in EMEA, please, if you've got any insight there.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of fundamental mistakes companies make, and we've made them before in the past, and I've made them before in the past. So don't treat Europe as one country. It's a series of multiple different countries, and a different GTM strategy across them all. The way you operate in Germany is very different the way you operate in Nordics and Netherlands to the UK. So, but that's the same with the US as well. You've got to treat the US as lots of different countries within that sort of within the one region. So I think that's the first thing, is having a country targeted plan. Without that, your chance of success is pretty low. So I think that's the first fundamental reason. And also understanding the way you deal with customers within that. And I think that's where the sort of kind of cultural and the regional nuances come into it. And also, I would say, when you're approaching those countries, also understand your maturity of market. So, and I think, and we'll probably talk about this a bit later, but, businesses, when you're entering the market, it's a different skill set to when you're already in the market. And I think that comes into when the hiring stuff. And I know, Simon, we've worked over this for many years, in those kind of early days of attacking a new country, trying to launch a new country where the competition's fierce. It's a whole different skill sets and strategy around when you're in the more mature marketplaces as well. So cultural fit first, but also maturity on where you are in a particular market is also another key thing. So you can't go full enterprise straight away as soon as you land in the country. You've got to sort of work your way up to get that credibility first.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really interesting point. I know we've worked with each other, we know each other really well, but I think I can only talk about it from a sort of broader recruitment standpoint. There's a lot of education on those 2 points that need to be done, especially when I'm working with companies that are coming from outside of Europe into EMEA. Gone are the days, I think, of just dropping one resource into London and expecting $1 million or £1 million in 12 months, from there. There's certainly sort of a broader ecosystem, infrastructure, time, marketing, all of that good stuff that needs to be put into it. And understanding about the different markets and the complexities. But if you get it right, as you've seen, with your previous couple of companies, it can really start sort of, a good sort of catalyst into other, exciting deals and exciting things down the road, I think.
Yeah. And that's what kind of, and just to add to that, as I said, I think that's when you've got small teams and when you're startups or you're in growth mode, you've got to be exceptionally agile as a business. You've generally got, you're very light on resources, trying to cover an awful lot of other regions or landscape and sort of stuff there as well. So having that cohesive framework that you're all operating with across marketing, across sales and across, customer success and solutions, it's never been such a critical time. You've all got to move together. It's too easy to, and I think sometimes in businesses when they're well funded, that can also be dangerous because you spend money and go fast in the wrong direction. So, and I've certainly been in those situations where I've been guilty of that before. So that overarching plan about going to market, gaining growth in these, and having that regional focus is, I think, where it all drills down to. So having that framework and following that framework, try not to, and I'm a great believer in building beachheads and build on top of that. Don't look at Europe and try and take on the whole of Europe. Try and take on certain key countries within Europe and have a strategy for those. And then, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That beachhead, I've heard that being used by lots of people. It's an interesting topic in itself, I think. Okay, cool. Right. In terms of the next point, we were just coming across into technologies. I mean, the market we sit in is fascinating. We talked about, you coming from a tech background yourself, but, one of the big driving factors and catalysts about people getting in the market and being successful is tech stack, I do believe, right? Alongside people, clearly. What do you personally feel are the kind of must-haves around early stage SaaS companies when they're going to market in terms of your toolkit for your sales team, Martech stack? Are there any tools that you see at the moment that are must-haves?
Yeah, I think the big fundamental question you've got whether you're expansion, new markets, greenfield sites, or new regions is data. How do you understand what the target market is, and to understand that sort of kind of data? So, and I think a lot of companies don't spend enough time on that. Like, who is our ideal customer, and how are we going to sell to them, and what's the messages they want to hear? So I think that's a fundamental thing. People move ahead very quickly. They have a couple of early success, and then they end up doing what I call ripple chasing. They end up chasing, a bit of success over here, and then all of a sudden we've derived a market, and let's jump into that. So first of all, I think the key tools is trying to understand that market. So a combination of sort of kind of Zoom info. There's plenty of. I mean, I get emails every day of offering me the promised land on database lists. The reality, whether it's correct or not, I don't know. I bought some of them, not particularly been great. I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do, but it depends on the data you get. So, but that whole just systematically understanding what's our ICP, how do we find them, where's those watering hole activities, so accessing the market. So spending a lot of time on that data. Making sure the data accuracy, making sure the email address is correct. I mean, Lusher, Zoom Info, all these tools to harvest information is great to build your database from the ground upwards. But also, don't just do it once. Constantly just enrich it, on a weekly basis. Keep building it. So it's. I mean, there's plenty of tools out there how to put information. I wouldn't say there's one single tool that's been amazing. Depending on where you are in countries. Some, Zoom Info is better, Lusher or other platforms are, better. So, understand where the most accurate data is, or do beta testing against different tool sets. Get trials set up and just beta test the data and see what's quality from that side. But first of all, I would say whatever tools you can do to understand your market and understand your, with a clear direction on who your ideal customer is. First of all, don't do what everybody else does and goes, give me the top 100 e-commerce businesses in the UK and then become my target. They're the list that everybody's after. Sometimes, sanity is not vanity to a certain extent.
Yeah, of course. There's a big pool out there, isn't there? You don't have to go for the top tens, as you say.
Everybody does. Everybody does.
Yeah. Do something different. I mean, I guess to that point, I mean, once you know why these people are buying, and you build the data story around that, then obviously you can start defining a repeatable playbook, and that's obviously what you want to roll out across your sales team, I would imagine, to sort of stop that leakage, and that wasted effort. Okay, and how do you see that? I mean, I know you predominantly worked for kind of small to medium size, apart from Groupon, of course, but in the Martech space since we've met. But how do you see that sort of scaling? Do you see there any involvement with other like tools or tech stack as the company hits certain milestones, or do you think it's the same sort of answer you just gave?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a tech stack perspective, as you get more funding and move forward, I think it's there's and you touched it at the start, things like RevOps and sales ops and sort of stuff there. That's where you can just do what you do but better. So the investment in those cross departments, I think, is really critical. They can save. I mean, your most expensive commodity is your sales team. on an hourly basis. So, by feeding them better data, by leveraging other departments really helps. Partnerships and all these sort of things there as well, working in that sort of Unisys. And I assume you're going to talk to Emparticle and sort of stuff about that, and that's something they do really well, and we work very closely with them. But I would say it's not necessarily technology as you expand and grow. It's about processes and having the ability to get better data accuracy and be able to reach more quicker as part of that phase plan. I think that's the tipping point as you start to grow and sort of kind of maximize on your growth.
So it's efficiency, right? Driven by the data that you're able to extract. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when you start off, you don't have those kind of sales ops, marketing ops, all these kind of complex departments. So it's you've got to be a little bit down and dirty and a bit agile in the way you get the data, and you're spending an awful lot of time as a sales team trying to find that information from tool sets. Once you get your early success and get revenue on the board and start building that pipeline, that's where you can then understand what's working, what's not, and doubling down on that, and then understanding how can we harvest this data quicker and better. And that's where RevOps, to bring all that quality data in about what's working, what's not. Sales ops for helping enriching that data effectively. They're still using the same tools, but you're taking that responsibility away from the sales team, which is, as I said, usually a high cost to more efficient departments. But you're giving them instructions based on a very clear strategy of what you're looking for.
Yeah. No, it's cool. I see. It's a completely separate topic in another episode, but I'm seeing RevOps and sales enablement becoming more and more kind of crucial to scale up and startups. I always saw them in bigger businesses being quite trendy for all of those reasons that you've discussed. Just trying to move the responsibility, as you say, almost give specialists the responsibility for driving that exercise, as opposed to just bolted on to somebody else's job. It's one of the sales guys.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think salespeople are good at many things. Generally, good salespeople don't want to spend 3 hours doing a spreadsheet. But on the same basis, you wouldn't want them to either. You want to maximize their time to make sure their time is utilized in front of customers, which is what their job role is. But yeah, I would say data-driven decisioning is vital in today's business. It's, as I said before, it's too easy to go in the wrong direction quickly unless you have those checks and balances into it. So understanding, top of the funnel movement, are the MQLs good quality? Are they moving through to SQLs? Are the SQLs going to opportunities? To understand all those kind of key metrics across SMB, mid-market, enterprise, to analyze all that data, just making sure that what you're doing is having that, that investment, because what you might be doing today might be showing returns in 3 to 6 months' time. So it's important to track those metrics through. I would say RevOps and sales ops are critical in that moving forward. And enablement, strong believer in enablement, not just when people start for the first 2 weeks. Everboarding is an amazing thing, and also enabling. And we're talking about predominantly sales teams as well. Not just necessarily product training. Helping them with competitor analysis. Competitors are changing all the time. Sort of helping them, skilling them on an ongoing basis is really critical to get, again, to be more effective and everything else as well. So we spend a lot of time, diagnosing wins, but also losses as well, to understand what can we do better. And this is where the enablement then would loop into it as well. So, and I think that's the key to getting a, fully functional or highly effective sales team.
Really, really good points in there. Okay, and look, moving on to kind of the actual, physically hiring these people, what are the key characteristics or qualities you look at when assembling a high-performing sales team?
So I would, complementary is the first thing. So in my mind, I sort of kind of try and build a sort of kind of perfect team of complementary skill sets. You don't want everybody all the same. And you need to understand you've got your people that are very, if we just take AEs, for example, I've got a term called street fighting mode, just purely because, in the startup side, you've got competition, which is very real. You've got to think on your feet. You don't have these pages of enterprise logos you can talk about that we work with. So you've got to be very adapting and very proactive in your sales strategy, but also be a closer as well. So account management, you're doing multi-hazard roles. So, in that sort of kind of early phase, that more multidisciplined salesperson is really important. Once the business becomes established, you can take on those more AEs. You've got your inbound function working, your demand generation function working. You can then move to more seasoned account managers that are very safe pair of hands, very structured, very program orientated. So just be very conscious where you are. We made some mistakes years ago when we launched in America. We hired a load of people from Salesforce, and we didn't have any customers in the US. We're a unknown brand. And not to say people from Salesforce are bad, but their level of maturity or their product awareness they're used to, they can phone people and say, "Hey, I'm from Salesforce," and they go, "Yeah, we know you guys. That's great." Whereas you're phoning from a brand that they've never heard of, and they just didn't know how to manage that. They're just used to that more of a rigid process that startups generally don't have, or growth businesses generally don't have. So within the sales team structure, making sure that you have those complementary teams. Work with a good recruiter partner. My advice is, not pushing you, Simon, but as I said, work with one key player that really understands the culture and what you're trying to achieve. Don't try and work with a PSL of 10. Otherwise, you'll just get numbers on the sort of table. So be very agile in the way you approach hiring as well, and invest in time and get to know people. And making sure that what they're bringing you the skills you want, but you also as a business giving them what they're looking for, and that will help them get the longevity out of the person as well, and the success. Fingers crossed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. I think that's just to unpick that a little bit. It's like when we're doing searches, not just from our Engage, but other companies. It's really sort of the company really humbly recognizing the stage that they're at. And it's like, you're completely right. Somebody that sat at Salesforce or Oracle or Adobe could be absolutely fantastic enterprise sellers, which fit the job description nicely from the right background, but they're not going to want to do all the outbound or all the hustling or just be completely comfortable in all of that chaos that pre-Series A may well be. So it's trying to marry that hard skill and soft skill that I think we're going to talk about in a minute. But that's really interesting. And then, you talked about, using 10 agencies. I mean, there is obviously, there's value in covering the market quickly in numbers, but, there's also a lot of damage that can be done around brands, cannibalizing, approaching the same candidates, all kind of that good stuff. And I know you know that, very well, Jason, from the past, and, preach about it almost. So we don't need to.
It's true. And you're promoting your brand to the market, and I think if you go with too many agencies and they're not a fait on what you're looking for. Yes, they might be aware you're looking for an AE. That's it. They might be aware roughly what the business does. That's it. But there's more to it than that. It's a job for somebody is it's a big strategic move. We're not just going in. People aren't just looking for a simple job. They're not there for 3 weeks. They're moving on somewhere else. So it doesn't really matter. And I just find that's a negative thing because there's great agencies out there and there's not so great agencies out there. And I think where people are then contacting individuals which may be good people in the market space and to pretend to be representing a business because they're just speculating and going to market, and then they realise that they can't work with you because they're not on the PSL and never go back to that person. The perception of that candidate is still on the end brand. So I think that's I think that's a lot of it is and there's and I've been involved with players that have been very bad at that. I believe that everybody needs to be communicated with. Making sure in a tight time, making sure that that brand is protected. Even if it's a no, and pass that back in an informative time, because treat people a little bit like how you want to be treated yourself. So it's it's a personal process as well, and that just helps promote the brand. Not everybody's right for every business, from both sides. So, but it's protecting that right from the very start and what agencies you're working with and how you brief them to what you're going after as well.
And I think that employer brand thing's ever so important. I think just to dig again a little bit on that, because I mean, I was reading Scott Brinker's. I went to the Anticon conference, and Scott Brinker was
Okay.
talking about, the chief Martech and obviously the huge growth. I mean, there's a little bit of troubles at the moment, but there's like 11,000 vendors there, all vying for talent, all have great marketing. So that touch point with an external service provider to the open market is so valuable, right? To try and make that
Mm.
differentiation. So I think just handle with care, I think is probably, that's a great point if you're looking to try and accelerate your talent program. Um, Okay, so just in terms of the metrics, so like, I mean, clearly sales is all, you live and die by the numbers, right? We talked about
Yeah.
data, we talked about, revenue is the be all and end all, of course, right? But when you're bringing a sales team, people on board into your teams, what metrics do you generally try and track, and how do you see that change over a period of time, as they sort of onboard and bed into your company?
Yeah. Well, I think firstly, in lots of business, people are KPI and OKR obsessed. I guess that's the key thing. I'm not, one of those people that's probably more of a realist. So, and this is where it comes back to understanding individual skill sets and making sure that each of them have got a roles and sort of stuff there, and you understand what their remits are and their skill sets are. Um, I'm never one of those people that say you need to do 100 phone calls a day, and that's the way that I prefer. I don't mind if people do 3 phone calls a day, but they're the best ones and very targeted and have the right success. So I think first of all, let's fundamentally understand what makes success. And I know it's about pushing the funnel through and stuff through, but it's not necessarily how many phone calls and stuff you do at the front end results in the amount of deals you book. So I would say from my perspective, it's more about understanding the funnel that each individual person's under, and that might be slightly different. So, one person might have to do 10 meetings a week to get to achieve. The other person might have to do 5. But it's understanding what those are, and it's different to SMB to mid-market to enterprise. And also the quality that they're going there. So the first metric I understand is irrelevant to how many phone calls, is the meetings they're having, are they with the right people? So, so it's understanding, and as I said, I just, and I get the team to really understand, like, are they serious about doing something, or are we just having conversations? So let's class the first metric. The amount of serious conversations you're having on a weekly basis is the first thing. Forget the amount of MQLs or SQLs. That's something that I work with the marketing team and deal with that, or the SDR team. But predominantly from the AE side is understanding. Are they? They might just be busy, but are they busy with the right people? Are they busy with the right people we can close deals with in our ICP and everything else as well? Secondly, then we're looking at the fit ratio and also understanding. So working with the AEs to build sort of kind of deal plans to understand of, like, these are what the moving parts are, these are the decision makers are, I'm talking to the right people, so we can manage that deal correctly. And then thirdly is making sure that they've got the right support for the business from our side to make sure that they can push it through the funnel. So from solutions, from marketing, from partnerships, to making sure that I've got all the building blocks from our side to really push that through. So for me, it's about more readiness for market. Yes, the ultimate goal is close business, but really trying to understand the funnel a bit more granular detail prior to that.
Okay, that's cool. So those metrics again, you're really trying to enable those account executives to get from A to B, right? You're trying to put them in
Yeah,
enough of the right rooms, and giving them the
yeah,
tools to be successful. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And just making sure that the numbers below it, or the detail below it, is not just the amount of meetings or the amount of phone
Mm.
calls or the amount of ops they're raising. It's about, are they the right ops? Are they rather the right meetings? Sometimes, people love filling their diaries with loads of meetings and looking really busy. That works in some businesses, but in startups and growth where there's nowhere to hide, that doesn't work. Because
Mm.
ultimately we've got a number to complete at the end of it, and we haven't got a sales team of 30 or 40 people, usually below 10. So there's less room to hide, and each person's got to contribute, otherwise we miss our target. So I guess understanding the building blocks below that and making sure that we're asking the right questions, just making sure that they're asking the right questions below it, and helping them, coaching that to make sure that they're understanding all the unknown factors as much as we can do in those deals. They're the key things.
Control what you can control, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I mean, we touched upon it earlier, and you talked about complementary, right? So the next point I wanted to raise is there's always the balance of hard skills and soft skills. And I guess culture is the heartbeat of the business. Drives performance, is what why people join startups, right? As opposed to going to these big corporate companies. But when my question is when you have sort of 2 or 3 good candidates in an ideal world, right? You run through a process, you've got one head count, okay, and you're looking at these people on paper, and they fall somewhere in the spectrum of good hard skills and good soft skills. Do you have a bias on one side or the other, or is what's your ethos on that?
Well, I believe the right person can be trained. So it's easier to train the right person than try and change the wrong person to a certain extent. So I think that I'm a great believer on that side. So I much prefer to choose the person that I can work with and adapt, as opposed to the person who thinks they've got all the answers already, because it may not work and they're not prepared to listen to change. So yeah, I mean, I'm not the person who says, and I predominantly work in Martech. I'm not the person to say that everybody's got to come from Martech. They must have 5 years experience and achieved a quota goal of 90% plus on the last 5 years. And now some businesses look at that very hard criteria. Back to what we were saying, just because you've hit a target of 1.5 million a year in Salesforce doesn't mean you're going to hit 1.5 million in a startup. Because in Salesforce, and I don't know why we're picking on Salesforce, there are other ones available, but you know what I mean, from that large corporate entity. As I said, a good friend of mine, Jason, runs Salesforce, so I'm not picking on Salesforce, but yeah, as I said, but yeah, so it's, but from, I would say, that more established corporate entity, it's because they just might have some good accounts in their name and be lucky. Yes, luck comes into a great deal, but as well as the right process. But I would say the right person from a softer skills is more important than the harder skills. I can train people on product knowledge, I can train people on process, but the softer skills to fit into the team and the right culture, I think, is the most important thing. A very skilled person with the wrong culture and organization can be detrimental.
Be damaging. I've seen that. Yeah. I mean, great background CV, but I think just you talked a little bit about street fighting, right? That was your analogy, wasn't it? But the hustler and somebody that can get on with the people in the office and galvanize the supporting functions to get the group, to do the deals, right, and go the extra mile can sometimes make all the difference in a startup. What I see, anyway.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the challenge in a startup or a growth business. As you said, not everything's defined. The processes aren't 100%. We've got the framework for them, some of the details being filled out as we go through. But the person who wants to contribute to that, and help and support that mechanics of growth. Each business is different. There's a basic playbook, a strategy, but ultimately, you've got everything. People who like working that agility, I think, is the best term, are the better in the startups and growth. People who just want to have that sort of very rigid process and sort of stuff there's plenty of other companies there they can work for, but probably startup and growth, they might be attracted to it because they're fed up of the corporate world, but the reality is they do it for 6 months, then go back to it. So it's understanding those people, I think, is the key thing. What's the key driver here?
I think there's positives and negatives to both, aren't there, in some ways? But
exactly, yeah.
You've got to be you've got to sort of accept ever change, haven't you? Almost in the startup space, and not sticking to that rigid JD. Mucking in when needed. But yeah, I mean, it's exciting, that's for sure. I'm sure you'd agree.
Definitely.
Okay, cool. So look, we talked a little bit about not treating Europe, and about that education piece, right? But when I'm speaking to new clients who are looking to hire in Europe, one thing that they can definitely control is the interview process, right? And I don't know whether it's a sign of the times and I won't make any specific examples, but at the moment we're seeing an incredibly long interview process at times, quite a lot of procrastination around certain things, which leaves you very susceptible sometimes and open to other companies coming in and taking the top talent, right? They're maybe a little bit more decisive. That's my take on it. Now, what I want to just understand from you is just on that point, when you're hiring top salespeople, do you have like a framework that you look to try and follow in terms of process, things you try and find out without giving away your secret sauce, of course, right? And if so, what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, I think the key thing was when you're interviewing people, it's easy to interview the interviewee type persona. Some people are amazing at interviewing. As you know, when I go through the process, my first interview process is like, look, is there a fit? Very relaxed, cultural fit to understand, is this person right? So the step one for me, respectively, is, we can see from their CV, their background and their experience and stuff there as well. That's a given. But the first of all, are they the right? Do they have the right drivers that fit into the organisation? So phase one, I think, is that sort of kind of cultural fit, personal fit. Then we move into the sort of kind of the presentations and bits for the sort of second bit. So it's kind of casual to start off with, then goes into formal process. Some people do it the other way around, where they do a formal process. Then they have the drinks with the team type thing on the last day after the offer's been made to see if it's the right fit. I do it the other way around, just because in probably in startups and growth businesses, the cultural fit is critical. Those are going to be detrimental to a small team. So, then we work on the fit side. So slightly different around. But like you said, time kills deals on everything. So the longer somebody's on the market, runs a risk for all the other players out there. We all know in Martech world and other sort of kind of worlds, there is no abundance of jobs out there, despite the global recession or whatever everyone wants to talk about. There's plenty of companies getting lots of investment in our particular space. So there's always plenty of jobs out there, and always plenty of hiring. So, it's important and we touched on it earlier. So the perception of you as a business, you as a hirer, from somebody they want to work with, is what's going to take you through that process. So a tight process is critical, because people build perceptions about you as an organization from the first dealing, through the agents they've just been contacted with, through the interview process. And that will decide whether you can actually bring them on board or whether they're going to go to a more established player with a higher salary.
Totally. So are you saying 2 stages or 3 stages? What are we saying?
Yeah, depends on the seniority of the person. If it's an AE, I try to go through 2 stages.
Yep.
If it's a senior hire, generally that involves a third level with further people from the management team. But general ways, I try and keep it the 2 stages.
No, I think that's great.
And also offer the transparency with it, them talking to the members of the team as well. So as you know, I always do this, open it up for an AE's joining, offer up who they want to talk to on the AE side, not me saying, I've got this person, you're going to talk to them as part of the interview process. But I think it's important for that person to get that sort of cultural fit, and also important for the small team as well, that they're getting, having some sort of kind of influence of who else is coming into the team.
Yeah. And that's the cultural balance, isn't it? If you get it wrong, it can be quite damaging, and you want everybody to be involved, and that will be the difference between where they join, because people spend a lot of time, not necessarily in the office, but certainly interacting with the people. If you're only ever speaking to one person in the interview process, like yourself, Jace, then that could also, against another process that's offering a wider perspective, that is also a point of differentiation. Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Very true.
Great point. Okay. I'm seeing more and more of these. I don't know actually if you're a member of them, but things like Scalewise and Pavilion and like the revenue leaders, I think that these communities, and I think they're brilliant, right? To get like-minded people in a room and talk about stuff like this, about tech stack, about industry problems, right? But I guess from your perspective, if there's any new sales leaders out there that are just kind of cutting their teeth and learning their craft a little bit, are there any kind of resources or things that you would try and point them to that could help them with sort of accelerating their learning or reading or online?
Yeah, I mean, I think in today's terms, there's lots of content out there. I think there's lots of SaaS metric books. I mean, I constantly read still books. As I said, I quite like when I go on holiday, sad as it is, just getting that time to digest and sort of stuff there as well. But it'd be an audio book. There's lots of those communities out there. Being honest, because I travel an awful lot, I don't get time to go into those things on a regular basis. But what I do is I always try and learn from my peers. So, and I take time to once a month to meet up with some of our tech partners, leadership, and sort of stuff there as well, just to discuss what they're doing, what's successful, what's working for them, and being transparent with them. And I do that with a few of our tech partners on a regular basis, just to have that sort of kind of peer-to-peer strategy sessions. Same markets, slightly different markets, depending what you want to call it. But ultimately to understand, how they're approaching things around events, how they're doing, where they get some great content. I was with somebody the other day that was utilizing Chat GPT for, a very used term nowadays, but to build their prospect list for events. So getting ideas like that all the time, but all I would say to people is, just speak to people, ask them, don't be afraid to ask, just get ideas off anybody in the industry, consume data, every idea is a good idea, but just it may not be right for you. So just talk to people, but just don't be afraid to ask. You don't be this new manager that thinks they know everything and terrified to ask anybody because they feel it makes them look inferior for whatever reason. It's not. That's the best way to learn.
Mm-hmm. Being very humble, I think, is such a great quality,
Totally.
isn't it? Not everybody knows everything, and there's no shame in asking, absolutely.
And constantly evolve. Yeah, constantly evolve as an individual yourself.
Yeah. No, that's all great. Okay. Again, as we mentioned, and you touched upon it there actually, so it's maybe part of the answer to this question, but from your perspective, partnerships and alliances, right? BDR, SDRs obviously playing a role in all of this, right? But partnerships and alliances, what's your take on that and how that can be kind of a force magnifier?
It's probably one of the most vital parts of any business. I can't express it anymore. It's, when you look at the metrics of what partnerships team can deliver if done right, you're coming to deals or being introduced to deals at a mature level. You're also being brought into deals by a trusted another vendor that's already has a relationship with them as a trusted partner. So your credibility is, rather than starting at 0, goes straight in at 3 or 4. And because you're coming at the right time, the deal cycle tends to be a lot shorter. So cost of deal is a lot less. Deal velocity is a lot quicker, and success criteria is a lot better. So why wouldn't you? Is the honest answer.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you? So, but in the caveat from there, I think everybody is doing partnerships to a certain level. A lot of them aren't doing it well or investing in it. They do it is because everybody's doing it. And I think the key thing to do is when you approach partnerships, see how can you make it front and center. So the way I look at our pipeline is, if marketing should be involved in nearly every deal, whether it's ABM or support or some kind. But so especially the enterprise deals, if partnership aren't involved in at least 40% of our enterprise deals, why not? Why haven't we bring in some partners involved? Why aren't we talking to the partners, the other technology platforms? We're not the only platform in the space. So, why aren't we talking to technical partner sort of stuff there as well? So the question is, should be involved in that. And that's going to help our close rate, especially as you start to approach mid-market and enterprise. But yeah, absolutely critical.
I've seen some companies really smash it out of the park, and it is a bit of my perception is it's a big role, right? It's lots to it. So I've seen companies, and it's become a bit more trendy nowadays, but companies, maybe put one person in. That's a really tough gig, right? To try and get that going, right? But when they sort of, if you support them and nurture them and look at it from a mid to long term perspective, And certainly, I won't name particular companies, but some companies, you really see the fruits of those labours coming in for all of those nice referrals,
Yeah,
the additional exposure and brand awareness that's given. Partner marketing is another topic in itself. Yeah, I mean, but then there's also companies that do it particularly badly and say it doesn't work. Um, but it's a fascinating topic. Coupled with RevOps and enablement, I see them as probably the most sort of buzz topics. Within the GTM thing at the moment. Um,
yeah. And I would say just on the partnership side, everybody looks at partnerships as, again, that sort of kind of vanity metric of, marketing and look at their success by the amount of, inbounds they get.
mm,
Partnerships would be doing the success of, how many net new referrals they've done on a monthly basis. But, what I'm more interested in is, we can all be busy. And anybody can just do loads of referrals for non-existent opportunities or non-existent right deals, in random countries that aren't your beachhead focus. So,
mm,
then you just end up being a distraction to the business rather than a benefit. It's bringing partnerships into the whole core strategy about, where you're going as a business, what regions you're focusing on, what customers what prospect ICP you're focusing on, and which agencies sit within those ICPs. And they're the partnerships we want. So, it's a very much more of a strategic approach rather than just go, yeah, let's just all onboard agencies, because my metric is, to onboard agencies, and my target is four a month, and I don't care where I get them from. So,
mm,
that's the difference of doing it well and not doing it well. So, yeah, ultimately they might. Generally, most of them don't have a revenue target. They just have onboard partners, enable partners, and as I said, it just and just introductions on a monthly basis. But back to what I was saying before, it's the quality that's important. If it's not going anywhere, and everything comes at a cost, doesn't it? At a time, if you're taking the AE over to an opportunity that's been a referral partner, but it's not a great opportunity, they've just thrown it over the fence just to keep them happy, then that person end up wasting 3 hours on something that's not going to go anywhere. So,
mm,
they could have been doing, far more better outreach and sort of stuff themselves. So it's about the value that's driving.
mm, mm. 100%. Okay, I mean, there's a lot in there. Thanks for answering all those questions. I think there's some fantastic insight into, the 10 or 15 years that you've been, specifically doing this particular role. Um,
Yep.
a lot of it's around sort of working smarter, not necessarily harder, I think. I think it was a really interesting point you talked about the soft skills. Now, there's got to be a balance, right? In terms of that product fit too. But I think there's a lot to be said for somebody that can be very coachable, in a,
Yep.
and be very humble. I mean, that's a great personality fit to be able to take that on board, learn from somebody that's done it before and take that to market and not have to unlearn too much before, coming into the job. You talked a little about data, that's the heartbeat of any business, and understanding your ICP and the opportunity for a company to accelerate its success about taking on Europe on beachheads, not treating it
Yep.
as one island. And the other, amongst a lot of other really interesting things was treating the relationships with respect. I think that's a
Yep.
great point. From a recruitment perspective, and I am totally biased, but from a recruitment perspective, whichever agency you decide to use, pick your partner. Qualify out hard, pick your partner, because that's going to be your interface to the market, and that's going to be the person that everybody thinks about when they think about your brand and the person that's knocking on that door. So I think that's a really, some people are quite flippant about that, I sometimes think, and go, oh, we're going to work with 3 to 5 agencies and we'll get there in the end. I think that's a really bad tactic. And I think you really
Or,
need to recognize
or
that that's the holy grail.
or cheap or cheapest isn't best. Just don't work for an agency just because they're cheaper than everybody else.
Yeah,
That's a common mistake I think I see startups making. Was money's a rare commodity and budgets.
yeah,
So just throwing that out there sometimes, as you said, just because they're approachable there, they want to do it at a much cheaper rate than everybody else. You can't buy quality sometimes, and it's just
yeah,
inefficient. Short
yeah.
term gains, very long term pain.
Yeah. But I mean, it's going to be more painful if that person churns in 3 or 6 months, isn't it? You've got to start the search again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's a completely, that's probably again a biased topic.
Yeah.
Hey, look, that's 52 minutes. I said I wasn't going to take more than 45, but we've got a couple of additional questions, just a little bit of fun. Jace, we know each other
Cool.
pretty well, but for the people that don't, some quick fire questions. What comes into your head straight away, not too much thought. First question is, favorite piece of tech or app you are using at the moment?
iPad.
iOS or Android?
iOS, 100%.
Okay, good. Night at the disco or night at the restaurant?
Restaurant.
Restaurant. I had to think about that one though. Okay,
Yeah.
favorite food?
Fish.
Okay. Favorite movie?
Mm, Good question. Oh, good question. Don't know actually. Don't know. I wouldn't say I've got one particular favourite one. But yeah, consume lots of Netflix and stuff, but not probably one famous movie that I keep going back to.
Okay. Favorite place you've been on holiday or visited recently? Or not recently, but in your life?
Ever. Maldives is still my favourite.
Oh, that came up last episode too, actually. What is your guilty pleasure?
Guilty pleasure. Consuming sometimes rubbish TV, because it doesn't involve too much brain power. So guilty pleasure is I sometimes watch Coronation Street.
Oh my goodness! I thought you were going to say Love Island then, but yeah, Coronation Street's even worse.
Just sometimes have it in the background and just like playing it without really consuming the storyline. Just that's only because my mum used to watch it when I was younger and stuff there as well, and put it in the background, which constantly entertained my girlfriend about why. But I couldn't tell you on the characters.
Okay. I bet you could. If you had a superpower, what would it be and why?
Fly, definitely.
Okay. Last question.
You could get to places really easily. Get to places. It'd be so much easier. Train strikes, air strikes. It makes my life chaos.
Your expense bill would be a lot lower as well, wouldn't it? I guess that would be good.
Exactly that.
You live in Bristol. You still living in Bristol? Is that right?
I am indeed. Yes. Yeah. Indeed.
Okay. Cool. Last question, and then I'm going to let you kindly go. Look, God forbid, all right, but your house is burning down. Okay, you got one personal item. You're not allowed to say iPad that you need to salvage, and why?
Or technically, I should say girlfriend, then dog.
Yes, you're allowed to say that. Good answer. And I wonder why people don't answer that way sometimes. But anyway,
I don't want to say dog. I don't want to say dog first, but she might listen.
You don't need to explain. I get it totally. Okay, that wraps us up. Look, 55 minutes in. There was loads of great content there, Jason. I really appreciate you. You've got a busy day, I'm sure, and week. Appreciate you just sharing some of your insight and sort of that, Diamond's experience that you have over that topic. Hopefully there's some value there for our listeners, and I appreciate that again. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Simon. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Good to speak to you. Bye.
Bye-bye.